I never asked to be born into this family. Hell, I never asked to be born at all. But here I am, Michelle, the unwanted firstborn of a broken marriage. My earliest memories are tainted with the bitterness of divorce. I was barely out of diapers when my parents split up. By the time I was 3, Mom remarried to a guy named Tom. Tom wasn't all bad, I guess. He doted on my mom, showered her with gifts and attention. But it was clear from the start that I was just baggage that came along with the package deal. Things changed when I was 5. Mom got pregnant, and suddenly the whole world revolved around the precious new baby growing in her belly. Tom was over the moon, talking endlessly about his child as if I didn't even exist. The day my sister Emily was born, I might as well have turned invisible. Tom held her like she was made of glass, cooing and making faces I'd never seen before. Mom beamed with pride, as if this was her first child. "Michelle," Mom said, finally remembering I existed. "Come meet your baby sister. You're going to be such a big help with her." I peered into the bundle of blankets, seeing a wrinkled red face that looked more like a potato than a baby. "Hi," I mumbled, not feeling the instant connection everyone seemed to expect. From that day forward, my childhood ended. I wasn't just Michelle anymore, I was Emily's big sister, the built-in babysitter, the little helper. "Michelle, watch your sister while I make dinner." "Michelle, can you change Emily's diaper?" "Michelle, why don't you read Emily a bedtime story?" It never ended. Every time I tried to sneak away to play with my friends or just have a moment to myself, I'd hear the familiar refrain, "Michelle, where are you? Emily needs you." I grew to resent that tiny, squalling creature that had stolen my place in the family. But whenever I showed the slightest hint of frustration, I was met with disappointment and lectures. "You're a big girl now, Michelle," Mom would say, her voice stern. "It's time to start acting like it. Emily needs you to be a good role model." "Yeah," Tom would chime in. "You should be grateful to have such a wonderful little sister. Some kids would kill for that opportunity." And so began the pattern that would define my childhood, always putting Emily first, always pushing my own needs and wants aside. I was Michelle the babysitter, Michelle the helper, Michelle the invisible girl. As Emily grew older, the divide in our family became more pronounced. By the time she was 7 and I was 12, it was clear to everyone, including me, who the favorite child was. "Michelle, Emily needs your room for her art and music," Mom announced one day. "You'll be moving into her old room this weekend." I stared at her in disbelief. "But, that's my room. I've had it since I was little." Tom stepped in, his voice patronizing. "Now, Michelle, you're old enough to understand. Emily needs more space for her hobbies. Her synthesizer and easel take up a lot of room." "What about my things?" I protested weakly. "Where will I put my books in?" "You'll make it work," Mom interrupted. "Emily's talents need nurturing. You want to support your sister, don't you?" There it was again, the guilt trip, the expectation that I'd sacrifice everything for Emily without complaint. I bit my tongue and nodded, fighting back tears. The move was just another blow to my already fragile sense of belonging. Emily, of course, was thrilled. She pranced around her new, spacious room, smirking at me as I crammed my belongings into the tiny space that used to be hers. As we got older, Emily's preferential treatment only became more blatant. She knew she could get away with anything, and she took full advantage of it. One day, I caught her sneaking money from Tom's wallet. "Emily," I hissed. "What are you doing?" She just grinned and pressed a finger to her lips. "Shoo, don't be such a tattletale, Michelle." Later that evening, all hell broke loose when Tom discovered the missing money. $20, he bellowed. "Who took $20 from my wallet?" I saw Emily's eyes widen in panic, but before I could say anything, she blurted out, "I saw Michelle near your room earlier." All eyes turned to me. I didn't," I stammered, but Emily cut me off. "Check her backpack," she suggested, her voice dripping with false concern. To my horror, Tom marched over and yanked open my school bag. And there, tucked into a side pocket, was a $5 bill. "Michelle," Mom gasped. "How could you?" "I didn't take it," I cried, realizing too late what Emily had done. "I swear, it wasn't me." But my protests fell on deaf ears. I was grounded for a month, forced to do extra chores, and lectured endlessly about trust and responsibility. All the while, Emily watched with a smug smile, reveling in her victory. That night, as I lay in my too-small bed in my too-small room, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, always the scapegoat, always the afterthought. I needed to find a way out. High school became my ticket to freedom. While Emily coasted through on charm and our parents' doting attention, I buried myself in books and extracurriculars. Every A on my report card, every academic achievement was a step closer to independence. The day I received my college acceptance letter was the happiest of my life. Full scholarship, dormitory included. I was getting out. The summer before college, I picked up a job at a local cafe. Every dollar I earned went into a secret savings account. Never again would I be financially dependent on my family. Moving day arrived, and I couldn't pack fast enough. As I lugged my suitcases to the car, Emily lounged in the doorway, smirking. "Have fun at loser college," she drawled. "Try not to bore everyone to death with your nerdiness." I bit back a retort. In a few hours, I'd be free of her taunts. College was everything I'd hoped for and more. For the first time, I was judged on my own merits, not constantly compared to my sister. I threw myself into my classes, determined to make the most of this opportunity. My human resources management program was challenging, but fascinating. I loved learning about organizational behavior, talent acquisition, and conflict resolution. Ironically, my dysfunctional family had given me plenty of real-world experience in those areas. Between classes and studying, I kept my job at a cafe near campus. The work was exhausting, but every paycheck felt like a victory. This was my money, earned by my own efforts. Holidays were awkward. I'd return home to find Emily the center of attention, as always. She was in high school, and apparently excelling in her social life, if not her studies. "Michelle," Mom would say, her voice dripping with false cheer, "why don't you tell us about school? Any boys in your life?" I'd give them the bare minimum of information, counting the hours until I could return to campus. My real life, my real self, was there now. Graduation day arrived before I knew it. As I stood in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, I felt a surge of pride. I'd done it. Despite everything, I'd succeeded. My family was there, looking slightly out of place among the celebrating crowds. Emily rolled her eyes at the ceremony. "God, this is boring," she muttered. "Can we go eat now?" I ignored her, posing for photos with my roommates and favorite professors. These were the people who had supported me, who had seen my potential. They were my real family now. Fresh out of college, I landed a job as a human resources manager at a large company. As I scrolled through apartment listings, my heart sank. Even the tiniest studios were way out of my budget. "Michelle," Mom said during one of our infrequent phone calls, "why don't you move back home? Just until you get on your feet. You won't have to pay rent, just help out around the house a bit." Against my better judgment, I agreed. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I saved enough for my own place. I should have known better. From the moment I moved back in, it was like I'd never left. Emily was still the golden child, now in her college, fully paid for by our parents, of course. I, on the other hand, was right back to being Cinderella. "Michelle, can you start dinner? We're starving," Mom would call out the moment I walked in from work. "Michelle, the bathroom needs cleaning," Tom would announce, not bothering to lift a finger himself. I'd come home exhausted from a full day at the office, only to face hours of cooking and cleaning. Meanwhile, Emily lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone and complaining about how hard her life was. I bit my tongue so often I'm surprised it didn't fall off. This wasn't what I'd agreed to, but every time I tried to protest, Mom reminded me that I live here rent-free. Then came the bombshell. Emily, barely into her sophomore year, announced she was getting married. To a guy 10 years older than her, no less. "Isn't it romantic?" she gushed, flashing her enormous diamond ring. "Jason is so successful. He says I don't even need to finish college." I watched in disbelief as our parents fawned over Emily and her fiancé. They threw themselves into wedding planning with gusto, sparing no expense. I couldn't help but wonder if they'd be this generous if it were my wedding. But of course, in their eyes, I was destined to be the spinster daughter, too focused on work to find a man. The wedding was a lavish affair. I stood beside Emily as her bridesmaid, plastering on a fake smile as I watched my parents beam with pride. This was everything they'd ever wanted for their favorite daughter. After a honeymoon in the Maldives, another gift from our parents, Emily and Jason moved into a rented apartment. I thought maybe things would improve at home without Emily's constant presence. I was wrong. A few months later, Emily showed up on our doorstep, glowing with news. "I'm pregnant," she squealed. As my parents erupted in joyous celebration, I felt a knot form in my stomach. Somehow, I knew this would end up complicating my life even further. Sure enough, over the next few months, I was roped into helping Emily prepare for the baby. Shopping trips, doctor's appointments, setting up the nursery, all on top of my job and household chores. When my nephew was born, Emily and Jason were over at our house constantly. More messes for me to clean, more mouths for me to feed. "Isn't it wonderful?" Mom cooed, cradling her grandson. "Our family is growing." I looked around at the chaos, toys strewn about, dishes piled in the sink, my work papers shoved aside to make room for baby gear. This wasn't my family, not really. And this definitely wasn't my life. A year had passed since the birth of Emily's son. I'd settled into a routine, balancing my job with the endless chores at home. It wasn't ideal, but I was making it work. Then came the dinner that would change everything. "Michelle," Mom said, her tone unusually serious. "We need to discuss something. Your sister's moving back home, with Jason and the baby. They can't afford their place anymore." I waited for the other shoe to drop. It didn't take long. "We need you to move out," Tom said bluntly. "By the end of the week." The fork clattered from my hand. "What? But, where am I supposed to go?" "You're a grown woman with a job," Mom said dismissively. "You'll figure it out." Anger, hot and fierce, bubbled up inside me. "Why is it always about Emily?" I exploded. "Why do you always choose her over me?" "Don't be selfish, Michelle," Tom snapped. "Your sister has a family to support. You're alone. You can manage on your own." "Selfish?" I repeated, incredulous. "I've done nothing but sacrifice for this family for years." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Well, we won't be needing your sacrifices anymore. Or your services as a maid, for that matter." In a daze, I packed my belongings. There wasn't much, most of the furniture belonged to my parents. Tears streamed down my face as I lugged my suitcases to my car, but I refused to let them see me break. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Emily's car pulling into the driveway. She gave me a little wave, her expression a mix of triumph and happiness. I found a small apartment across town, barely more than a studio. It was all I could afford on such short notice. As I unpacked my meager belongings, a strange sense of peace washed over me. For the first time in my life, I was truly on my own. Days turned into weeks. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove I could make it on my own. And to my surprise, I found I was happier than I'd been in years. No one to clean up after, no one to cook for, no one's needs to put before my own. 2 years flew by in a whirlwind of hard work and dedication. My efforts hadn't gone unnoticed. I was promoted to Chief Recruitment Manager, a position that came with a significant pay bump and a lot more responsibility. I moved to a nicer apartment closer to work, filling it with furniture I'd chosen myself. No hand-me-downs, no compromises. Just my style, my space. It felt like freedom. I'd finally found some peace, away from the constant drama of my family. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. Emily's name flashed on the screen. Michelle, her voice was syrupy sweet. "I need a favor. Jason's looking for a new job. I was hoping you could help him out at your company." I sighed. Of course. It wasn't a social call after all. "I can look into it," I said cautiously. "But I can't promise anything." When Jason's resume landed in my inbox, I did my due diligence. I found a few entry-level positions that matched his qualifications and passed them along. "These are beneath me," Jason scoffed when I called to discuss the options. "Don't you have anything better?" I bit back a retort. "These are the positions available that match your experience. Take it or leave it." He left it. A few weeks later, I heard through the office grapevine that Jason had landed a cushy job at our biggest competitor. As head of sales, no less. I nearly choked on my coffee when I heard. How the hell did that happen? I muttered to myself. It didn't take long to find out. Mom let it slip during one of our infrequent phone calls. "Oh, your father pulled some strings," she said casually. "He knows someone on their board of directors. Isn't it wonderful? Jason's doing so well." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All those years of hard work, of proving myself, and my parents had never once offered to help me. But for Jason, they'd move mountains. I wanted to scream, to confront them about the unfairness of it all. But what would be the point? They'd never see it my way. So I swallowed my anger and said nothing. A month passed. I threw myself into my work, trying to forget about Jason and my family's blatant favoritism. Then came the call that would change everything. "Michelle," Jason's voice was low, conspiratorial. "I need your help with something." "What is it?" I asked, wary. "I need some information. Customer lists, pricing details. You know, the good stuff." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Are you asking me to steal confidential information?" "Come on, it's not stealing," he cajoled. "Just sharing. Between family." "That's corporate espionage, Jason. It's illegal." He laughed, as if I'd told a particularly funny joke. "No one will know it came from you. I'll make it worth your while. We'll split the commission." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Absolutely not. Don't ever ask me something like this again." "Don't be so uptight," he pressed. "Think about Emily, about your nephew. Don't you want to help your family?" That was the last straw. "If you ever contact me about this again, I'm going straight to the police," I snapped. "And don't you dare use my sister or nephew to manipulate me." I hung up, my hands shaking with rage. How dare he? But I had a sickening feeling that this was far from over. A week after Jason's disturbing phone call, I was buried in paperwork when my assistant buzzed me. "Miss Carter, your sister and her husband are here to see you." I froze, a chill running down my spine. This wasn't a coincidence. "Send them in," I said, my mind racing. Emily bounced in, all smiles and chatter, with Jason following close behind. Surprise! We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd drop by. As they settled into the chairs across from my desk, I discreetly sent a text to our head of security, "Keep an eye on Jason, my brother-in-law. Suspicious activity possible." "So, how have you been?" Emily gushed, launching into a monologue about her son's latest achievements. I nodded along, half listening, my attention focused on Jason. He was fidgety, his eyes darting around my office. Suddenly, he stood up. "Sorry, where's your restroom?" "Down the hall to the left," I said, watching him hurry out. The moment the door closed, Emily leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh my gosh, Michelle, you'll never believe what happened at the grocery store yesterday." So, I was in line, right? And this lady in front of me had, like, a million coupons. As Emily prattled on about her mundane grocery store adventure, my suspicion grew. She was trying too hard to keep my attention, her story unnecessarily detailed and animated. My hand inched towards the silent alarm button under my desk. And then the cashier called the manager, and you won't believe what he said. Emily continued, her eyes darting to the door and back to me. I pressed the alarm. Within seconds, I heard commotion in the hallway. Emily's eyes widened. What's going on? We rushed out of my office to find chaos. Security guards were wrestling Jason to the ground outside the sales director's office. Scattered papers littered the floor around them. Let go of me, Jason yelled, struggling against the guards. This is a misunderstanding. Emily screamed, rushing towards her husband. What are you doing? Let him go. I stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. The police arrived minutes later, taking statements from everyone involved. I told them everything, Jason's phone call, his request for confidential information, my suspicions about today's visit. The next morning, I was called into the director's office. My palms were sweaty as I knocked on the door, unsure of what to expect. Michelle, the director said, gesturing for me to sit. I want to commend you for your actions yesterday. Your quick thinking and integrity prevented a potentially disastrous breach of our company's security. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job. He nodded approvingly. That's the kind of dedication we value here. In fact, I think it's time we discussed your future with the company. As I left his office an hour later, my head was spinning. A promotion, a raise, and a commendation in my file. It was everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of. But as I sat at my desk, staring at the family photo I still kept despite everything, I couldn't help but wonder, at what cost did this success come? And what would happen next, with my family? The morning after the incident, my phone rang incessantly. I knew who it was, before I even looked at the screen. With a deep breath, I answered. Michelle. Mom's voice was shrill. What have you done? Before I could respond, Tom's voice boomed through the speaker. You need to fix this, Michelle. Now. For the next hour, they berated me, demanding I recant my testimony and take the blame for Jason's actions. Think about your sister, Mom pleaded. Think about your nephew. You're going to ruin their lives. And what about you? Tom chimed in. You're all alone. No husband, no kids. It will be easier for you to bear all this trouble than for Jason. I felt a familiar pressure building in my chest, the weight of their expectations threatening to crush me. But this time, something was different. I was different. No, I said, my voice steady. I won't do it. Jason broke the law. He has to face the consequences. There was a moment of stunned silence before the tirade began anew. You ungrateful child, Mom screeched. After everything we've done for you. That's it, Tom growled. You're no daughter of ours. Don't expect a penny when we're gone. The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling oddly light. It was over. Finally, truly over. The next few months were a whirlwind. Jason was charged with trespassing, attempted burglary, and industrial espionage. He lost his job, his reputation in tatters. Emily, miraculously, escaped charges. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove my parents wrong. I didn't need their support or their money. I had myself, and that was enough. News trickled in through mutual acquaintances. Jason left prison, but unable to find work, turned to the bottle. Emily, disillusioned with her fallen prince, began a parade of affairs. The final straw came when Jason caught her in bed with another man, in my parents' house, no less. The ensuing brawl ended with Jason on the street and Emily served with divorce papers. Emily stayed at my parents' house, bringing each of her new lovers there. It wasn't long before they'd had enough, kicking her out just as they'd done to me. When she lost custody of her son, my parents stepped in to raise their grandson. As I heard each piece of news, I waited for the satisfaction to set in, for the vindication I'd always imagined I'd feel. But it never came. Instead, I felt nothing. They weren't my family anymore. Their drama wasn't mine. Years passed. I climbed the corporate ladder, my hard work and integrity paying off in ways I'd never imagined. And then, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, I met him. Mark was everything I'd never known I wanted. Kind, supportive, and completely removed from the toxic world I'd grown up in. When he proposed a year later, I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was small, intimate. Just our closest friends and Mark's family. As I stood there, reciting my vows, I realized I'd finally found what I'd been searching for all along: unconditional love and acceptance. I haven't spoken to my parents or Emily in years. Sometimes I wonder about them, about my nephew. But I don't reach out. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way.